my stance on Bob Seger is probably I don't have a stance. I don't dislike him. I don't like him. It's right in the middle. Objectivity, that's my gimmick. So I'm going to go objective. Now I have to come up with a favorite song, though. You just mentioned a bunch. I don't want to double up, so now I got to think real quick. Night Moves, is that a Bob Seger song?
That is a Bob Seger song, very much so. Night Moves.
Night Moves. I'll go that.
All right. Not bad. You do night moves. You do morning moves. You do South Philly moves. You know, that was another thing I thought about last night when I went to that concert. I pulled down 11th Street, and that fencing was already up. You know how they sort of cattle shoot you so the people can't just drunkenly walk in the middle of the street. You know, they make you go down the sidewalks and stuff.
It's a good cattle shoot. You need that.
Yes.
And so, I like, the fact that I didn't know he was 74. I knew he was getting up there, but I'm always impressed when anyone can do anything at that age and get up, because if you gave me free Bob Seger tickets, I'd be too tired to go to the concert. Never mind put on the concert.
Well, I definitely stayed out past my bedtime last night, but and my voice, I was already getting a cold anyway, so that was the 1-2 punch. So I'm going to count on you to do a little more of the talking this morning and carry the ball, so to speak, and or catch the ball, right? I mean, let's start with that. Everybody wants to know. Number one question, is DeSean going to play?
Yes, barring a setback today, and you can never say never with DeSean, and especially these types of soft tissue injuries. But the plan is for him to play, and he got through practice again on Friday. Finally spoke to the media, didn't want to speak to the media, but did, and admitted that is the plan. So he is expected to be back out there on Sunday. And that answers a lot of people's questions, because I always say that when people think about trades or bringing players in, they kind of don't think about the back end. And I've been saying since the beginning of these trade rumors and everybody wanting Josh Gordon, the Eagles don't need another receiver if they believe DeSean Jackson was coming back. They continuously said he was, and he is. So they don't need another receiver. Where's Robbie Anderson going to fit in if DeSean Jackson is playing?
Makes sense to me. Of course, I'm listening to you all week when you join Mike Gill on the Sports Bash for Football at 4 and on all the other platforms that you're on here on 97.3 ESPN. Now, listen, something picked my ears up there a minute ago. You said he talked, he didn't want to talk. That was drama in itself. Like, hadn't they, scheduled his press conference early in the week, and then he wasn't going to do the press? Give us a little bit of that.
Well, Tuesday is the first open locker room of the week. Nothing is scheduled per se. People have to speak during the week by NFL rules. Generally, technically, you have to speak every day in the open locker room period, but that's not realistic.
Right, they hide.
When it comes to star players, they generally at least have to get out there once a week. And we saw DeSean on Tuesday, and he said he'll talk later in the week. And then when I caught up to him real quick, just heading to the shower, he said Thursday. When Thursday came, he didn't want to speak. And then Friday, he finally did. So there was a little bit when I say you have to speak as a star player. If you're injured, you don't have to speak. So while it's not set in stone, it was a clear indication that if he wasn't going to talk, probably wasn't going to play, and the Eagles could get over that hump in that direction. But the fact that he took his medicine is another positive sign that he's going to play.
John McMullen with us here on the Pete Thompson Show on 97.3 ESPN. So I thought, I get the transcript like you do in your email of what Doug said. Of course, you're sitting there when he says it. That's the difference. I get it, and I scroll through and see who asked what question and try to, because you can't always tell context from a printed answer to a question. But I thought Doug really did a pretty humorous way of balancing all the guys that might play and might not play, including Avonte Maddox looks like he is going to play, but then there's some other guys that aren't going to play more than likely.
Yeah, well, two guys that were ruled out, Nigel Bradham, Jason Peters, so we know they're not going to play. And it's very interesting this week for Andre Dillard, the rookie left tackle, because Khalil Mack is on the other side. The Eagles are very aware of that. Typically he lines up on the other side, but they move him around. And they're expecting the Bears to see a rookie and think it's fresh meat in the pool. So they think there's going to be a lot of Khalil Mack on the right side of the defense over Andre Dillard. And they're preparing for that. And they understand they're going to have to give some help, whether that's an extra tight end, a back chipping, maybe before they go out on a pass pattern. They are going to have to give Andre Dillard some help. So that's something to keep an eye on. But as far as the injured guys coming back, you mentioned Maddox. I thought the more interesting part, we knew he was going to play because he's back as a full participant in practice, but Doug has thrown him right into the pool and says he's going to be the slot corner again. So this is the third straight week. Jalen Mills in Dallas, Ronald Darby in Buffalo, Avonte Maddox against Chicago, where the Eagles are getting back one of the starting corners. And for the first time in a really long time, they have the three corners they want out there.
Yeah, that's, getting healthy is counter to, why do you have to go trade for somebody when you're getting these guys back? That's almost like that would be their spin, or that would be their defense of, gee, why didn't you make a move at the deadline? Because we're getting actual quality guys back. It would be their spin, right?
Yeah, that's what they've been saying pretty consistently, and there's some truth to that. I mean, you're not going to get players coming in midway through the season that are going to be more effective than people that understand the system. So if Tim Jernigan's coming back this week, or even if it's the week after the bye, you're not going to be able to get a better defensive tackle. We've talked about corner a lot. That's the one position where I think the Eagles would have gotten a player. But if you look at who they were offering for a first and second round pick for Jalen Ramsey, they would take a corner. They know they got to get better from a talent perspective. But if you're talking about difference makers, if you're bringing in just an above average player midway through the season, he's probably not going to be able to give you more than what you have already on hand. Learning a new system, might be a better player, but as I often say, Pete, it's not fantasy football. It's not a video game. You're coming into a new system, new coach, new teammates in the middle of the season, and you're expecting that guy to be the same guy in his previous spot. It usually doesn't happen that way, and people should have learned their lesson from last year, and I think the Eagles have. On paper, Golden Tate was a significant upgrade. You saw the struggles the Eagles had trying to fit him in.
Right. Absolutely, 100%. And that's the thing is, like, you make the move, then you feel like you have to shoehorn the guy in. I do want to loop back just real quick to the secondary, because a second thing popped in my head, and I'll give a tip of the cap to my man Ryan, too. 13 months since the Eagles had a healthy secondary, 23 consecutive games with one of their starters missing, and 18 different starting secondaries they've used since last year began. No wonder they've had such problems on the back end.
Yeah, I think you called Hunter Ryan again, unless Ryan jumped into the studio.
Ryan jumped in. Yeah, good. No, Ryan emailed me. He texted me, check your email.
I didn't know if it was I don't think it was a Beard situation. Yeah, I think it was 23 games since they've had essentially what they – and you could argue back then they didn't know what Avonte Maddox was. So this is the first time ever, really, that they have their plan and what they want on the field as far as Jim Schwartz and comfort factor. I would argue this is the first time ever. Now, also part of that is the Eagles had high hopes. I'm not trying to downplay the fact that Sidney Jones has been a huge disappointment, and they expected a lot from him, and it just hasn't manifested that way. So that's part of it as well. But as far as what the defensive coordinator wants, as I said, this is you don't even have to go back that long. This is the first time that he's had the three guys that he wants on the field, or at least at his disposal.
Can I make a PT joke real quick and say, where is Izell Jenkins when we need him?
A little toast reference in the morning. See, you bring it back to breakfast.
I thought I was so clever at like 7 or 8 or however old I was when he was just getting burnt left and right and every day. But, I mean, was the gold standard, since that phrase gets used around the franchise too, was the gold standard like Lido and who was that other pairing on the other side? Or was it like Bobby Taylor?
Sheldon Brown.
Right, Lido and Sheldon. Was that the gold standard? Like, you know what I'm saying? When you look at that
probably
position?
for modern fans, Bobby Taylor and Troy Vincent were really good as well. But the game has changed so much. And if you watch Thursday Night Football, and there's another player that was on the field after, he's back after a lengthy suspension, Patrick Peterson, who's considered a top 5 corner. And that's another player the Eagles checked in on because there was some thought that Arizona would be willing to move him. And that's a player they probably would have given up a first-round pick for. He got toasted consistently. Everybody gets beat in this league at that position. And that's one of the reasons Jim Schwartz loves Jalen Mills, because so much of it is about having the short memory and not getting affected by getting beat and going out to the next play and competing and keeping your head up. And as I said, playing whatever word you want to use, confidence, swagger, what have you. That's so important because everything is skewed against you as a cornerback in the NFL. And you gotta persevere through that.
No doubt. And definitely the game has changed, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I sit there and I think like the reason they got Bobby Taylor was to specifically match up with Michael Irvin. At that point, they didn't have anybody physically that could kind of be the same height, battle for the jump balls, the one-on-one balls, like what Alshon Jeffrey does now today. I mean, you see the corner position, or at least the successful corners, are they what's the attribute that's the key attribute? And what does Jim Schwartz say? Is it speed? Is it jumping ability? What's the key attribute that makes a good NFL corner?
Well, when you have, if you look at somebody like Jalen Ramsey, who also gets beat, by the way, and has gotten beaten many times over his career, but is considered, if not the best, certainly amongst the top 5. You have the physical part. You have all that. You have the ability to run, the catch-up speed. That's all important. That's very important. Physicality and run support. And then what I talked about, the intangible part, the confidence, the understanding that you're going to get beat, the willingness to put that play in the rearview mirror really quickly and get out there and make maybe a play on the next chance you get. All of that enters into it. But, you talk about Michael Irvin, you talk about Bobby Taylor. Both of them, Michael Irvin would get 5 penalties a day, a game, for offensive pass interference. A guy like Bobby Taylor, he'd be getting flags left and right for defensive pass interference. So it's become much tougher for them. They can't be as physical, but you have to be physical within those first 5 yards. You got to be smart. You got to understand downfield what you can get away with. Get away with a little bit of hand fighting downfield, but you got to turn your head around. You got to play the ball. If you're playing the man, you're going to get a flag. It's quarterback's the most difficult position. Quarterback's the most important position. But if I were to put number 2 in the NFL as far as difficulty, it's corner. Those guys. It's almost an impossible job with the expectations placed on them. And, oh, by the way, Pete, they're on an island. If you make a mistake somewhere else, people don't necessarily know it. They might see, they might see an offensive lineman get beat, but maybe the protection was slid wrong. There's always possible explanations. If you're out on an island and you're getting beat, everybody sees it.
John McMullen with us here on the Pete Thompson Show on 97.3 ESPN. Absolutely, John. I agree with you. Quarterback, the toughest. Corner, you kind of have to have both of those positions. You almost have that baseball closer mentality where, so you gave up a home run, fine. You go out the next day and try to do it. Try to do your best. You have to have a short memory, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Since you mentioned quarterback, I'll use that as my opportunity to transition to the offense. And you had a great article on 97.3 ESPN.com. The headline is, Eagles happy to have what Bears didn't want. And this is a guy that, in the subject of the article, that maybe Doug Peterson wasn't so sold on in the beginning of the season, but I think now he knows what he has at number 24, Jordan Howard.
Yeah, it took him too long to figure it out. But I think it's interesting because if you obviously look at where Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy came from, it's Andy Reid. And that's who they learned under, and that's where they developed their chops as coaches in this league. And there's a lot of Andy Reid influence, and that's usually a really good thing. With the running game, it's not necessarily a really good thing. And certainly in the modern era, I think, people remember Andy from his lengthy stint here, but he's really, what's most impressive about him is his evolution as a coach. He's not one of those guys that stands still. So if you ever watch a Kansas City game, it's a completely different offense, and he understands it's a different game. We just talked about that. He's got tremendous amounts of speed on the field, starting with Tyreek Hill. Does a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of motion, a lot of eyewash, as Mike Groh likes to call it, to fool the defense. And he's got almost a home run hitter at every position. And that's what all his assistants and acolytes want. They want home run hitters everywhere. And my sentiment has always been, you used the baseball reference, Pete, I'll use one now. If you got a sharp single, take it. Let the next guy hit the home run. And that's what I look at Jordan Howard. He's not explosive. He's a chain mover. When the Eagles were playing the Vikings, Mike Zimmer talked about him, raved about him, and he had to see him twice a year in Chicago. And he said he's the kind of guy, you hit him at 2 yards, you get up from the pile, and you're 5 yards down the field as a defensive player. He's a chain mover, and that's important for this Eagles offense. And Miles Sanders is explosive, and you've already seen that in the passing game with the 65-yard touchdown last week. That's what the Eagles want. But Miles isn't ready from a running standpoint as a rookie. He's just not confident enough. He's not hitting the holes. There was really positive development in Buffalo on that, but it's a work in progress. Jordan's a veteran. He knows how to do it. And he was the third in the 3 years in Chicago, Pete. He was the third leading rusher over that span in the entire NFL. The Bears didn't want him. The Eagles didn't want him on the field. It doesn't make sense to me. Take the single and let DeSean hit the home run.
Sounds good to me. John McMullen with us here on the Pete Thompson Show. Take John McMullen whenever he answers the phone. It'll be an entertaining and fun 20 minutes. All right, a couple things to wrap up. First and foremost, you know me, I'm an old newspaper guy, John, right? So I have to attribution, right? The guy, the professor in college that was banging his fist and saying attribute correctly. As much as I love Ryan, who emailed me the stats, they came from Rube. So I have to give Reuben Frank a little tip of the cap for those stats. Ryan facilitated them getting to me. Hunter pointed at the computer to say, look at Ryan's email. I mean, there's all kinds of parts that are moving here. Okay. And then also a tip of the cap to you, because I appreciate you coming on the show each Saturday. So much so, John, that I'm going to give you next Saturday off.
I appreciate it, Pete. I need every minute I can get off.
It's out of the generosity of my heart. It has nothing to do with the fact that there's a bye week and no Eagles game. No, I'm kidding. All right, listen, we'll hear you again tomorrow, right, on the Countdown to Kickoff show?
Yes, hopefully. We're all day to day, but I plan on it, just like DeSean.
That's true. All right.
No setbacks. I plan on it.
I love it, John. All right, thank you, pal. And Night Moves, that was your choice, right?
Night moves. We're going to go with it.
All right, sounds good. John McMullen, follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen. Read his work on our website at 973ESPN.com. Talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, thanks, Pete.